Topic: the signal that should not exist. On a summer night in 1977, the strongest candidate signal in the history of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence did not arrive as a voice. It did not arrive as a photograph, a spacecraft, or a message that anyone could read. It arrived as 6 characters on a sheet of printer paper, 6EQUJ5. And the strange part is that the man who made it famous almost did nothing dramatic at all. Jerry Amon was not sitting in a control room waiting for aliens to call. He was reviewing data from Ohio State University's Big Ear Radio Telescope, a huge fixed instrument that scanned the sky as Earth rotated. The telescope produced long columns of letters and numbers. Most of them meant nothing to the public. To Amon, they were measurements. They told him how strong a radio signal had been at one moment in the sky. Then he saw the sequence. EQUJ5. The numbers and letters were not a sentence. They were an intensity curve. The signal rose, peaked, and faded in a way that matched the telescope's observing window. Amon circled it in red and wrote one word in the margin. Wow. That tiny note is why we still talk about it. But the story is not powerful because someone wrote an excited word. The story is powerful because almost every simple explanation leaves a bruise. The signal lasted about 72 seconds, which was exactly the amount of time Big Ear could observe one point in the sky as Earth turned. If it had been random local noise, why did it match the telescope's beam so cleanly? If it had been a known human transmission, why did it appear near a protected radio band close T? Oh, the hydrogen line. The frequency SETI researchers had long considered one of the most logical places to listen. And if it was truly from another intelligence, why did it never eat? To understand why this matters, we have to slow down and look at the machine before we look at the mystery. Big Ear was not a dish that could freely point anywhere. It was a drift scan telescope. It listened while the sky moved through its field of view. That means a real signal from a fixed point in space would not stay forever. It would enter the beam, grow stronger, peak, then fade away. The WOW signal did exactly that. The shape itself became part of the evidence, but the shape was only the first branch. The second branch is the frequency. SETI researchers did not choose the hydrogen line because it sounded poetic. Hydrogen is the most common element in the universe. Its natural radio emission sits around 1420 megahertz. If two civilizations had never met, never shared language, never exchanged a map, hydrogen might still give them a common reference point. A beacon near that region would be like placing a note beside the most obvious landmark in the cosmic landscape. That is why the WOW signal felt different from a random spike. It appeared in the kind of place where scientists had already agreed a meaningful signal might appear. Not proof. Not a message, but enough to make a careful person pause. Now the story has to become more cautious because this is where bad storytelling would jump too fast. A strong signal near an interesting frequency is not automatically an alien transmission. The sky is full of radio noise. Earth is full of transmitters. Satellites, aircraft, reflections, equipment behavior, and human systems can all create confusion. The honest version of the story has to let those explanations enter. One possibility is terrestrial interference. Maybe something on Earth produced a signal that looked cleaner than it really was. That explanation is attractive because it does not require anything extraordinary, but it has problems. The frequency region was supposed to be protected. The signal appeared in one of Big Ear's 2 feed horns and not the other, which suggests a specific patch of sky rather than a broad local blast. And the rise and fall fit the telescope's scan pattern. Interference can be strange, but this was not an easy throwaway. Another possibility came much later: comets. In the 2010s, a researcher proposed that hydrogen clouds around comets could have produced the signal. At first, that sounded useful because it offered a natural source. But then came the objections. Critics argued the comets were not in the right place at the right time, and that later observations did not reproduce the same kind of event in a convincing way. The comet idea did not disappear, but it also did not close the case. This is where the story becomes less about aliens and more about evidence. The WOW signal sits in a painful middle ground. It is too interesting to ignore and too lonely to confirm. Science is not built to crown a one-time signal as a discovery just because it is exciting. Science asks the same question again and again. Can we see it twice for the WOW signal? The answer has always been no. That is the emotional core of the story. Jerry Amon himself did not turn the printout into a declaration. Over the years, he remained careful. He was open to possibilities, but he did not claim proof. That restraint matters. It turns him from a character chasing fantasy into a character carrying uncertainty. He saw something that fit the dream better than almost anything else, and then he had to live with the fact that the dream never answered a second time. Now return to the printout. The 6 characters were not a message, but they became one. They told us something about how humans search. We build instruments, agree on rules, choose meaningful frequencies, scan the sky, and wait for a pattern that should not be there. Then, when a pattern appears, we do not get to keep only the exciting part. We have to bring in the limits. We have to ask about instruments, interference, repeatability, and chance. That is why the wow signal still survives in culture, not because it proves contact, it does not because it contains hidden words, it does not. It survives because it is one of the rare mysteries where the boring details make the strange parts stronger. The 72-second duration matters. The hydrogen line neighborhood matters. The 1-feet detection matters. The failed follow-ups matter. Every detail narrows the room, but no detail opens the final door. There is another branch here, and it points to modern SETI. Today, the search is broader, more digital, and far more sensitive. Projects can scan more frequencies, process more data, and revisit targets with better tools. Yet the old paper printout still has power. It reminds researchers that the hardest signal may not be the one that screams across the sky every night. It may be the one that appears once, perfectly shaped, then vanishes before anyone understands what they saw. To see why that still matters, imagine the work from the other side. A telescope does not give you meaning. It gives you traces. A line of data has no face, no motive, no cinematic music under it. Someone has to decide whether a number is just another number or the beginning of a question. That is why Jerry Amon is the right center for the story. He was not the inventor of the mystery. He was the first person who treated the trace with exactly the amount of attention it deserved. There is a quiet discipline in that. If he had ignored the printout, the signal might have disappeared into old data. If he had exaggerated it, the story would have collapsed into a claim that could not be defended. Instead, he did something smaller and more powerful. He marked the anomaly. He preserved the moment of surprise without pretending the surprise was proof. That is the difference between a mystery that lasts and a rumor that burns out. The Big Ear telescope also deserves to be treated like a character because the instrument shaped the whole event. Its fixed design meant the sky passed through it instead of the telescope chasing the sky. That is why the 72-second window is so important. The signal behaved like something entering and leaving the beam. If it had lasted too long, it might have looked more like local interference. If it had been too brief, it might have looked like random noise. The length sits in the uncomfortable middle, just right for the telescope, and therefore just hard enough to dismiss. Then there is the second feed horn. Big Ear listened through 2 receiving horns separated by a small interval in the sky. A real celestial source could appear in one and then minutes later appear in the other. The wow signal appeared strongly in one, but not as a confirmed repeat in the second. That fact can be used in 2 directions. Skeptics can say it weakens the case because a clean repeat would have been expected. Supporters can say it does not kill the case because the source could have been intermittent, narrow, drifting, or affected by how the telescope and sky aligned. The same detail becomes both evidence and limitation. This is what makes the case so useful for a storytelling channel. The mystery does not grow by adding wild claims. It grows by taking one technical detail seriously, then asking what that detail allows and what it forbids. The feed horn detail forbids a simple fairy tale. The frequency detail forbids a lazy dismissal. The failed repeat forbids certainty. The original printout forbids pretending nothing happened. Now move to the hydrogen line again, because this is where the story connects human imagination to physics. In ordinary life, a frequency is just a number. In SETI, the hydrogen line was a kind of shared cosmic address. Researchers argued that if another civilization wanted to send a beacon, it might choose a frequency that any scientifically mature species would recognize. Hydrogen is everywhere. It is not human culture. It is chemistry written across the universe. That does not mean the wow signal was artificial. It means the signal appeared near a place where scientists were already willing to listen carefully. The emotional turn comes from that contrast. The universe is enormous, indifferent, and mostly silent. Human beings, on one small planet, built an instrument and chose a frequency based on a theory of what another intelligence might consider obvious. Then one night, a signal arrived close enough to that expectation to make a careful reviewer write one word in the margin. The story is not that aliens called us. The story is that the universe briefly behaved as if one of our best guesses might not have been foolish. That is also why the failed follow-up searches feel almost cruel. Big Ear looked again. Other researchers looked again. Modern instruments have looked again. Nothing has returned with the same strength and shape. In many mysteries, a missing second event makes the first event weaker. Here, it does something more complicated. It makes the signal scientifically unusable as proof, but narratively unforgettable. The viewer can feel the door opening and closing in the same movement. The comet hypothesis is a good example of how the story should handle a branch. It should not be introduced as a villain or a joke. It should be introduced as a real attempt to solve the problem. If hydrogen around comets could create a radio signal in the right region, then maybe the mystery becomes natural. That would be a satisfying ending for a scientist, but then the branch has to be tested. Were the comets in the right place? Would they produce the right intensity? Did later observations reproduce the effect? The debate did not erase the wow signal. It showed how hard it is to close a case when the original evidence is strong but singular. That word, singular, is the key. A singular signal is almost impossible to love responsibly. If you believe too quickly, you turn science into desire. If you reject too quickly, you train yourself to ignore the rare event that does not fit. The wow signal forces a middle posture. It asks the narrator to hold tension without solving it. That is exactly the kind of emotional discipline OpenClaw should use. Curiosity first, restraint second, wonder last. There is one more reason the story keeps working. The physical artifact is simple. Anyone can look at the printout and understand that something was circled. You do not need to understand every detail of radio astronomy to feel the moment. A person saw a pattern, stopped, and marked it. That small human action gives the cosmic question a handle. Without the red circle and the handwritten wow, the signal would still be data. With them, it becomes a scene. But a good scene must return to the larger question. What are we actually searching for when we search the sky, not just aliens? We are searching for a break in the pattern. We are searching for evidence that intelligence is not confined to one planet. We are searching for a signal that can survive our own skepticism. The wow signal almost did that. Almost is the word that keeps it alive. So what was the wow signal? The most responsible answer is also the most unsatisfying. We do not know. It could have been human interference wearing a cosmic mask. It could have been an unknown natural source. It could have been a real transmission that never pointed our way again. The evidence allows curiosity, but it does not allow certainty. And maybe that is why the story works. The signal is not a conclusion. It is a test of how badly we want one. If we rush, we turn it into myth. If we dismiss it too quickly, we lose the one detail that made the scientists stop. The better path is harder. Hold the mystery without breaking it. A man sees 6 characters on a printout. He circles them. He writes, wow. Half a century later, the universe has still not explained what made him pick up that pen.